Silver Centurion Armor. Our first stop is the Silver Centurion. You might confuse this armor with some of the suits you've seen in the Iron Man movies, but the story and features behind this one are completely different. Throughout this video, we're going to talk about armors that we've never seen in the Iron Man movies or in the MCU films, but that actually exist in the comics. Our first armor is the Silver Centurion. This suit is extremely important in the comics because it represents a period when Tony Stark was determined to take control of his life again. In fact, with its iconic silver and red design, it's one of the most memorable Iron Man suits ever created. But the story behind it goes much deeper than just its appearance. Tony introduces this armor during one of the most difficult periods of his life, when he's mentally struggling, fighting through his problems, and trying to rebuild himself. You can almost call this armor a symbol of rebirth in the comics. Space armor. This is one of my favorite armors because it was designed almost entirely for space. Tony Stark created this armor specifically so he could survive outside Earth's atmosphere. It doesn't just provide oxygen and keep him alive in space, it also protects him against radiation and extreme temperatures. We're basically talking about a full package spacesuit. And in the comics, we see Tony Stark going on missions in space with this armor multiple times. In some stories, he even fights interplanetary threats alongside other cosmic-level characters. And honestly, this is something that disappoints me. We've seen Tony Stark travel to other planets and fight in space in the comics, but in the movies, we've mostly seen him operating on Earth, with only limited time actually spent in space. Wouldn't an Iron Man 4 set primarily in space be amazing? Don't you think we deserve to see that? Let me know what you think. Stealth armor. This is an armor I've personally loved for a very long time, and one I kept waiting to see throughout the Iron Man movies. Unfortunately, we never got it. And once you hear what this armor can actually do, you'll understand why I was so excited about it. According to the comics, this armor was designed to stay hidden from radar and heat detection systems. And just look at it. With its black design, it looks incredibly cool. But the black color wasn't chosen just because it looked awesome. The design actually helps reduce the armor's heat signature, allowing Iron Man to infiltrate locations without being easily detected. Basically, we're talking about a stealth suit that allows Iron Man to get in, complete his mission, and get out without anyone knowing he was there. You could almost call it an invisibility armor. Remember the conversation Tony Stark had with the kid in Iron Man 3? At one point, Tony says that maybe one day he'll build an invisibility suit. A lot of Marvel fans, myself included, got excited thinking that we might eventually see an actual stealth or invisibility armor. But we never did. Do you think Marvel could still give us something like this one day? What do you think? Hydro armor. Okay, it's time to be honest. I'm not saying, why didn't we see this exact armor in the MCU? Because, compared to modern technology, it probably wouldn't look nearly as cool today. As you can probably tell from the name, a hydro armor was designed to withstand the pressure of the ocean depths and give Iron Man mobility underwater. Tony Stark uses it to deal with characters such as Namor. But here's the interesting part, even though we never saw this exact design in the MCU, we have seen Iron Man operating underwater with his armor. The MCU has already shown us Tony Stark handling underwater missions with his suits. What we haven't seen is this specific comic book design. And honestly, I'm not criticizing Marvel for that. The writers designed this armor based on the technology and imagination of their time. But if this exact design were introduced today, it might look a little funny. Do you agree with me? Arctic armor. Once again, we haven't seen this exact design in the movies, but we've already seen many of its features incorporated into other Iron Man suits. The armor in the comics was designed to survive extreme cold conditions, and when I say extreme cold, I want you to imagine really extreme temperatures. It features thermal insulation, systems designed to prevent slipping on ice, and a power source capable of functioning without losing efficiency in extremely low temperatures. It actually sounds pretty cool and makes a lot of sense. But as I said, Tony Stark had already incorporated many of these features into several of his other armors. Thorbuster Armor. Now pay attention, because this is seriously peak Iron Man energy. Here comes one of my absolute favorites. I love the concept behind this armor, and I'm going to explain why. The Thorbuster Armor was designed specifically to stand against someone with power on Thor's level. And here's the crazy part, it wasn't actually Tony Stark who originally designed this armor. During the period when Tony Stark was dealing with Asgard and Thor, a specialized armor was created specifically to counter Thor's power. Unfortunately, we never got to see it in the MCU. And honestly, I think that was a huge missed opportunity. Bleeding Edge Armor. This armor takes technology to a completely different level. With the bleeding edge armor, the comics entered a whole new era because Tony Stark's armor was no longer something he kept in a closet, suitcase, or laboratory. Instead, the armor was stored directly beneath his skin. Imagine a nanotechnology-based armor embedded inside Tony Stark's body. Whenever he needed it, Tony could activate it and deploy the armor across his entire body within seconds. You can actually compare this concept to the Mark 50 from the MCU because that suit was heavily inspired by the idea of this comic book armor. But the comic version goes even further because the armor is literally integrated into Tony Stark's body. We're talking about technology that's way ahead of its time. Endo-Sym Armor. Now we're getting into something a little creepy and very different. You could almost compare this armor to a Venom story. The Endo-Sym Armor comes from Tony Stark merging with a symbiote-like organic structure. So the armor we're talking about isn't simply made of metal, screws, and mechanical parts. It's an almost living structure capable of reacting like an organism. And when Tony Stark wears this armor, he gets dangerously close to losing control. Because when you merge with something like a symbiote, you essentially have to share your body, and, to some extent, your will with it. I honestly don't know why the MCU never explored a story this interesting. How would Marvel even approach a concept like this in a solo movie? I don't know, but I would absolutely love to see it. What do you think? God Killer Armor. This is probably the most insane armor on this entire list, the God Killer. And just as the name suggests, this armor was designed to deal with threats on an absolutely massive scale. It's enormous. We're not talking about something the size of a normal Iron Man suit. We're talking about something larger than a building. When Tony uses this kind of armor, he stops being a human-sized superhero and becomes a cosmic scale force. Here's an analogy: if a normal Iron Man suit is like a car, the God Killer is like a skyscraper. It's basically Michael Bay on steroids energy. Seriously. But sometimes, power doesn't come from size. Sometimes, it comes from time. So what happens when the Iron Man we're talking about comes from the future? Iron Man 2020 Armor. Now we're moving into a completely different level because we're talking about an Iron Man from the future. The Iron Man 2020 Armor appears in stories set in an alternate future. In this timeline, technology is far more advanced, and artificial intelligence has developed to a much higher level. Of course, when we hear 2020 today, it doesn't sound futuristic at all. But when these comics were written, 2020 represented a much more advanced future. So the writers used their imagination and created technology that was supposed to feel decades ahead of our own. Honestly, I don't think they did a bad job. Iron Man 2099 Armor. If 2020 doesn't sound futuristic enough for you, then this one might. We're talking about the year 2099. And we're entering one of Marvel's most dystopian future concepts. The armor was designed around a world dominated by powerful corporations and a much darker atmosphere. And that's the important part. It's not just the technology that's more advanced. The entire tone and atmosphere of these stories are much darker. Iron Man has actually been associated with darker concepts quite frequently in the comics. And I don't think the MCU explored that side of Tony Stark enough. Tony Stark is actually a morally gray character, and I think that's one of the things that makes him so interesting and different. Do you agree with me? So, we've talked about a lot of Tony Stark armors that we've never seen in the movies. Which one of these would you most like to see on the big screen? Let me know in the comments. And if you want a part 2, I'd be more than happy to make one. Just write part 2 in the comments. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. I'll see you in the next video.